Hi, welcome to Worth the War. My name is Kimmy. The purpose of this channel is preparing people for healthy love and relationship and how to avoid abuse. If you think we can do a better job with love and relationship than we're doing in the modern culture, you have found the exact right channel. Today, I am very excited to introduce to you Brittney Herman. She is the founder of We Will, and she has done great research when it comes to the correlation between sex education and rape statistics in the United States. I'm so excited for her to share this with you and some of the other things that she's up to. Brittney, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kimmy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and of course to share my research. I'll go ahead and jump in on explaining it a little bit. My research was conducted during my Juris doctor's study at Brigham Young University. And what I did is I looked at the states with the highest and lowest rates of rape to see if there's any correlation between rape statistics and sexual education. So my study specifically looked at the 5 states with the highest rate of rape and the 5 states with the lowest rate of rape. And I found a correlation between sexual education and the rate of sexual violence in the state, specifically looking at rape statistics. What I found is that those 5 states with the lowest rate of rape taught 3 key concepts, and those were consent, coercion, and refusal skills. And that displayed to me that because there was a correlation between consent, coercion, and refusal skill instruction, that we can prevent sexual assault and rape to some degree, of course. I think that something else that's important about the study is also showing that this education has to be consistent and occur very frequently with a child so they can fully understand the implications of these concepts.
That is fantastic. Tell us a little bit about what We Will does on a larger umbrella since you've done that research.
Of course. So essentially what happened after I did this research is I thought, oh, great, like this is really interesting. I'll join an organization that's dedicated to sexual assault prevention. And I couldn't find one, not to say that they didn't exist, but I couldn't find one. And so I thought, well, someone has to work on this, so I'll start one myself. And I just went for it. And what that turned into is 3 main umbrellas that We Will works under. The first is education, and that's formal and informal education. So the formal education looks like lobbying legislators and speaking with them to help them understand that we need this education in our public schools. It looks like speaking to teachers and to administrators to help them understand the best way to teach these concepts where they're available. The second aspect of this informal education just looks like us educating the community, talking about these issues and having various community events, whether that's virtual now with COVID or prior to COVID in person. Additionally, our second point is community growth. So community growth is all about creating communities that support survivors and that understand the importance of sexual assault prevention and teach these concepts in their homes and discuss them openly in the community. And the third is survivor support and survivor empowerment. I was telling Kimmy before we hopped on here that really that wasn't the initial mission of my organization, but as we grew, we attracted a lot of survivors who are interested in this topic, and now we connect survivors with resources to help support them. We share survivor stories and help survivors feel empowered despite what has occurred in their past.
That is really helpful for me to understand kind of how it branches out from that. Tell me, what do you think the role of a parent is? What do you have any thoughts on that? I know you've thought a lot about how as a society and as schools, what would you kind of, if you were giving advice to a parent that said, hey, this is something I want to prepare my kids for, what would you suggest they do?
I would say the best education starts at home. And that's really, I mean, that's correct for everything. I think that schools can teach your kids concepts and they can teach them the intellectual side of things, but it's parents who instill value and instill values in their children that they want their children to emulate and continue on in the society. And so I think what's really important is having these discussions with your children and having them openly. I think there's 2 benefits to this. First, you will have children who are comfortable speaking to you about sexual topics. I know that in my family, and this is to say nothing wrong of my parents, but my sex talk consisted of me asking my mom, hey, I don't understand how sex works. And she said, well, do you need to know? And I said, no. And that was it. So it wasn't exactly comprehensive. And it made me feel uncomfortable with the idea of talking about sex with my parents and talking about these concepts. I think that it can help your child to better understand sexual concepts, of course, but perhaps more importantly, when it comes to your child maybe going through a sexual assault or something like that, they'll feel more comfortable coming to you as a parent. The second part of this that I think is critical is instilling values in your children to help prevent them from becoming sexual violence perpetrators. Because really what my study finds is that it's not random sexual assaults that are preventable. It's not the ones on the streets. It's not things like that. It's the ones between intimate partners and within relationships that are preventable, because what happens is oftentimes would-be perpetrators just simply don't understand what's wrong. And so you want to help prevent your child from becoming a sexual violence perpetrator just as much as you want to prevent them from becoming a survivor of sexual assault.
What a great perspective. I think that's one of the things that we just don't talk about enough, is that we have a great deal of control when it comes to shaping how our children view the opposite sex, intimate partners. And if we don't catch that, listen to that, you can take I say somebody that really could go either way, and you can foster or feed the right things or the wrong things. And I think there is an awful lot that's based on, making sure that our kids aren't abused, but what about making sure that our kids aren't abusers or bullies or right?
Exactly. And something I would add to that is research shows that oftentimes it's these ideas of traditional gender norms that are sometimes instilled in the home that can lead to sexual violence. So teaching young women that they have to be kind to men and that they're kind of there to please men. I mean, not that anyone teaches their child that directly, but saying, oh, you have to say yes to every boy who asks you to dance, sort of thing. That can instill in a young woman that she's meant to say yes to men, sort of thing. And it's the same thing on the man's side, where we have these ideas of toxic masculinity and being tough and things like that can lead to sexual violence. And that's a lot what other research shows as well. So those are values instilled in the home.
Right. And I think that really leads to the idea that, consent is something that we can prioritize regardless of the gender of your child. And consent in and of itself, mixed with empathy, is probably a pretty great vaccine for abuse, I would think.
Absolutely. And something that I think is important that parents understand is that consent is not an inherently sexual concept, that it starts from a very young age. And I think we've seen in our society and our culture lately a discussion around consent for young children and saying, oh, you don't have to kiss your grandma if she asks for a kiss, or you don't have to hug someone if they don't ask. And that's something that it is important to teach when they're young, both from the side of you don't have to receive or you don't have to give a kiss or anything like that, and you don't have the right to receive it from anyone. And I think teaching those concepts from a very young age is very important. So you're right, consent plays a huge role.
So I got to do an interview with Sharon Land, and I'll put the link down below. And basically, she gave the example of broccoli. She said, when you have dinner and your child says, I want broccoli, but maybe 3 hours later, they don't want that. You have the ability then to either foster consent or squash it when you say, okay, you've changed your mind. Now, there might be consequences. Maybe that means you don't get ice cream, but you have the right to say, I've changed my mind. And even that little thing feeds into, well, maybe you said you wanted to have certain intimate partner activities, but that day you decided you didn't. And there's no consent that is a blanket consent forever. So those kinds of things are very important to look at for little kids. So that is really helpful.
Yes. And I'll just add one more thing before we kind of close this portion. I know we're going to talk about the resources that We Will provides later on, but something I think fits in the conversation really well right now is We Will has a free children's book for all parents. And granted, the free version is the PDF. If you'd like a physical copy, you can order it from us. But what this children's book does is it teaches consent and coercion in innocuous situations. So that way children can learn about these situations before they reach the sexual aspect of it. And it includes in the book a guide for parents about how to transition these innocuous concepts into more sexual conversations. And so the book is called Do You Want a Cookie? And the premise is, yeah, you offer your friend a cookie and they say no. You're confused because you're like, cookies are amazing. I don't understand why you wouldn't want one. And it goes through various situations like that to help teach children about consent and about coercion and these issues, and is a helpful tool for parents, I think. And it's available on our website, but we'll talk about that later.
I think that's so underrated. And people don't really understand the power of that, because once you get to the intimate aspects of consent, there is a dialogue, an inner dialogue, a confirmation bias. There's so many things fighting against them. But if we can start before they get to that, and they just get used to feeling their sense of level and what they want and how they want to respond, then they will recognize when something tips them over. And I think that's great. I'll put the link to that book down below as well. So if anybody wants to look into that PDF or maybe give it as a gift to children, grandchildren, that's fantastic. So I really love what you're focusing on here, and I'm really excited to learn more from you. So let's look forward to going over some more on what it means to prepare somebody in the pre-dating world, the pre-dating stage, how to avoid abuse and recognize it. So thanks for taking the time to be here with us today. It was awesome to have you, Brittney. Just loved it. Looking forward to learning more from you.
Of course. Thank you.